Welcome to our 60-second podcast. Today we'll be talking about continuous improvement and structured problem solving with our very special guest, Dan Pinkham. What's the one thing you can do now to turn employee resistance into engagement during process changes? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and as usual, I am joined by my co-host, Ben Kleinman. Hi, Ben.
Hi, everyone.
And Cheryl Volpe.
Hi, Rich. Hi, everyone.
And today we have a guest that, well, I've known Dan for just maybe about 2 years now. Maybe it's as long as that, but we've got Dan Pinkham. Hey, Dan.
Hey, good morning, Rich, Ben, and Cheryl. Nice to see you.
Welcome. We're glad you're here.
So Dan, you and I and Ben actually have met through the Institute of Management Consulting, or consultants, I should say. Actually, you are among the new CMCs, is that right?
Yes, not even a week.
Not even a week. So
Wow.
CMC, first acronym of the day.
Dan back when?
Right.
We grow up so fast.
That's right.
Congrats, Dan. That's great. Good for you.
Thank you.
Awesome. So for those who don't know, that is a certified management consultant. But Dan has been doing consulting work for a while now, right? Hey, Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My company is called Lakers Consulting, and I founded it almost 6 years ago. Prior to that, I spent over 30 years working in industry, mostly in chemical manufacturing and more recently in mining and fertilizer manufacturing. And in those roles and as a consultant, I've helped companies improve how they operate, find hidden inefficiencies, and ultimately help them bring money to the bottom line. I'm a chemical engineer, went to the University of Maine for my undergrad. I'm originally from Maine. And while I was in West Virginia, I earned my MBA from Marshall University. Go Thundering Herd. I'm also a Lean Six Sigma black belt and went through master black belt training along the way, which means I've been trained to use proven methods to help companies identify waste and improve processes. And as I mentioned, I've worked in a number of industries in addition to mining and chemicals. I was in the fiberglass industry for about 3 years and have done a lot of things since then with all sorts of different companies. That's one of the cool things about being a consultant. And mainly I work with leaders and teams coming in with a fresh set of eyes to help them understand what's going on. And kind of my euphemism for that is you can't see the label from inside the jar.
Ah, yeah. Okay. I like that.
I like that.
And because people, they get very close to what they're doing. They're working in the business rather than on the business. So it's hard to figure out from that perspective what's holding you back.
Sure.
And so bringing in some outside perspective is important. As I mentioned, worked for a couple of different companies leading internal operational excellence efforts, Compass Minerals and Johns Manville specifically. I love working with teams and really to maintain a sustainable change. But when you're doing process improvement, you've got to get the team on board and owning that whole improvement process.
Sure.
So that's why I think there's some synergy here with what you do with the companies you help support. So there's going to be some what's in it for me for the employees, for them to want to work on helping improve the company. And so
That makes sense.
I'm
Absolutely.
excited to talk about that today with you and see where the conversation goes.
Awesome, man.
Love
We're
it.
excited about it too.
Great.
So Six Sigma, I got it. It's so that's like, I mean, in the ideal situation, it's like 4 parts per million in terms of defects, right? Is that it's
Yeah,
like
3.8. Yes.
3.8? Oof,
You can
that
tell
is
I'm an
a
engineer.
that's right. You got it down to the decimal point. Very good, man. Wow. Um, so when it comes to it's very interesting because like when I've worked with engineers, they may not, how do I put this? It hasn't been the most person focused. Is that fair to say that the most like people focused discipline?
I
Yeah,
think
yeah. If you're going to throw stereotypes, that I suppose that's as good as
I
any
guess I just
to
did that,
throw.
right?
But yes, that's people who are engineers tend to have a very methodical approach to addressing issues, be that problems they're trying to fix or just working through their daily lives. So it's that kind of approach which leads to doing good things in terms of manufacturing, and oftentimes it's more on the what, focus on the what than the who when
Yeah,
you're
right.
dealing with folks in those roles.
Which is extremely important. But
Yeah, so it's just that's why you have things like DISC surveys out there to understand who you're working with and what you need to do to work well together. And that's just another example of how you have to pull a team together.
Dan, was there a particular example, or maybe what was it in your career journey that you saw the need to switch, or at least start encompassing a little bit more of that broader perspective, not just focusing on a methodological, a very specific method to get things done, or to stop focusing only on the what and start branching out and encompassing other ways, looking at maybe the who, the why, things like that.
Yeah, so I'm fortunate, Ben, in that very early in my professional career, in fact, one or two, it was within 3 years out of school. I think it was a couple of years out of school. I was working as an engineer at a plant in Maine which makes seaweed extracts. This particular seaweed extract was used for DNA and protein electrophoresis. And so, you
Can
want
you
to know more?
define electrophoresis for
Sure.
the lay person?
Electrophoresis. So,
You know what that is, Ben?
okay, yeah. Another thing about working with engineers is they get technical on you real quick, so you got to pull them back.
Dan, Dan, one of the things you'll love about this podcast is Rich and Cheryl throw around acronyms fast and furious, and so it's sort
Okay.
of like a game who can get the acronym out fastest, and then we always have to define it. And I love that you brought in super deep technical terminology super fast. So
Yeah.
awesome,
So
very cool.
electrophoresis is pretty simple. Um, I'll go a little deeper in this example. So think back to when you were taking biology in high school, and you probably grew some cultures in a petri dish. That material that you grew the cultures on is called agar-agar. The material that we made is a derivative from that agar-agar called agarose. And basically what we did was separate the two components, agarose and agaropectin, out of that agar-agar gel. That's two constituents. Agaropectin is electrically charged. Agarose is electrically neutral. And so when you do that separation, you then can cast a very similar gel, and you can insert into it DNA fragments, and that gel acts like a sieve. And if you apply an electric current across that gel, the DNA will separate according to its size. The smaller stuff moves through the sieve faster than the bigger stuff. And so researchers will use that feature of agarose to then identify the DNA fragment size they want to then cut out of that gel and experiment with. And they're able to do that because they will put marker DNA with a known size in that gel next to the sample they're running to know where to cut that piece out. And so electrophoresis is simply applying an electric current across a gel like that.
Okay.
Thank you for explaining that. That was really cool.
Yeah.
Please
So I don't know
continue
where
with
I
your
was
story.
going. Oh, okay, back
No,
to
you were talking about that
back-
moment when you realized you were a couple of years out of school. You were working in a company. They were electrophoresicizing things, and you realized that you needed a little bit broader perspective than just the what and the method.
Yeah. So back to that. So when we talk petri dishes, we're talking something this big. When we're making the agarose, it's at an industrial scale. It's a smaller industrial scale, but it's still an industrial scale. And we did that separation by using various chemical engineering pieces of equipment, one being a filter press. And we inherited a filter press from a prior operation, which was oversized for what we were asking it to do, which meant we had lots of extra waste coming out of it.
Okay, sure.
And so and we could reduce in essence, the functional surface area of that press by doing some modifications. And I'm a young engineer. I'm coming into an area where I've got about 7 or 8 technicians who run the process and have been there years and years and years. And I'm the guy fresh out of school. And everybody recognizes there's a problem. They just don't know what to do about it and how to get there. And so I was able to work with that team and come up with a way to make some physical modifications to that filter press to reduce the size of it and shrink the surface area, reducing the waste that came out of that filter press at the end of the day, because we had to add some things in to be able to do that separation. And we also, by reducing that waste, vastly increased the yield of the material we wanted.
Oh, okay.
And this was all working with the team of technicians who ran the press, working with a team to make those modifications and then put them in place and then test it out. And at the end of the day, what's in it for me, for the company, was, I've got less waste, therefore less cost, improved yield, so I've got a bonus on the throughput side. For the people working that process, it was, I don't have to clean this press as much. I don't have to put this waste in a wheelbarrow, in essence, and get it out and have to put it in a dump truck and haul it away. So it was improving their quality of work by letting them focus on the value add stuff than the non-value add stuff.
Right.
And so that, as I said, was within a couple of years of graduating, and it reinforced for me that you've got to get the team's involvement up front to have any sort of successful change stick. And they owned it. And we as a team won a corporate award for that effort against a lot of larger sites.
Oh, wow.
So that was some very good positive reinforcement on top
that
of
must
that.
have felt really good for the team.
Yeah.
You
And
must have been
so,
really about that.
so that's been in the back of my head ever since as a win. And how do we bring that approach to any problem that we're working on? So the team owns it. Usually they own the pain of the problem, and they may all have individual opinions on what should be done about it. Oftentimes the first thing to do for us is to sit down and properly define the problem in a way that everybody on the team sees it consistently. And once you do that, it's amazing how quickly it goes from a team is formed out of a group of individuals with kind of disparate opinions and backgrounds and thoughts going in. You quickly coalesce into a unit. If you do that upfront work, spend a little bit of time to make that all happen.
Is that a diplomatic way of saying you experienced resistance as the whippersnapper in a room full of experience?
That is a diplomatic way. What we find is oftentimes the resistance is not. It is out of frustration.
Okay.
because people know there's an issue. It's personal to them, and they've probably been asking somebody to resolve it for a long, long time.
Mm.
And therefore, if the expert comes in, um, they are, they're automatically, nobody's going to listen. Yeah, great, you got me in the room, but I know you're not going to listen to me because nobody else has. And so, as part of that problem definition process, and this was true whether I was doing this internally for my own company I was an employee of, or now as a consultant, is usually I'm involved in something's broken with a process somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the key thing first is to know what the process is, but even prior to that, it is what's the problem we're trying to fix.
Sure.
And you're brought in as a consultant because there's a problem that's painful enough for them to want to bring in that outside help. They've recognized they've exhausted, they've either exhausted internal resources to do that, or they're just not getting traction for whatever reason.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's got to come in to read the label from the other side.
Right. So, so part of that, I'll come in and I'll have a definition from the client sponsor of what the problem is. But the first thing we'll do is we'll get the team together. We'll form the team. It's part of the kind of the de facto eight-step problem-solving process I use. It's getting the team, and usually that's a cross-functional group because we want to have we don't want to solve the problem for one set of people and cause a bunch of problems for their peers in another functional area, for example.
Right.
So we'll bring them all in. We will then spend time saying, okay, here's the problem we've been given. Let's talk about, is that the true problem or not?
Right.
Another way of doing that is saying, what about your perception of the problem is frustrating you?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a vent opportunity. There's also, usually up front before we do anything, I'll say, okay, knowing what you know today, what do you think we should do to solve the problem? And we'll get those solutions out. And I'm usually doing this on flip charts or a whiteboard, so it remains visible throughout the engagement.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
If I can ask at this point, Dan, are there house rules in that everyone has that opportunity at the podium to explain their point of view? That's great.
Yeah,
that's part of the process.
Usually, I'll do it like a structured brainstorming.
Great.
And that way, I'm forcing everybody to get their initial opinions out, and we'll go around until people exhaust. If they've got the things they need to get off their chest, we're going to go around until those are all exhausted.
Sure.
Then we'll go back and revisit the problem statement.
Right.
And say, knowing what we've talked through, is this problem statement correct, or how should we tweak it?
On day 2.
Well, I can usually get this in a morning or so.
Oh, okay.
So we'll do that. We'll tweak it, and then the problem statement is not something that was handed to them. It's now something they own because they've helped rebuild it, and they've also been heard. Mm-hmm. Because we've allowed them to say what's wrong with the situation and what's frustrating them and what would they do to fix it.
Sure.
And we'll use that material when we come back at the end of having gone through the complete problem-solving process and saying, did we fix this concern or not? Mm-hmm. Or is this concern even related to the problem? Because oftentimes people have other baggage they bring into the room, and this is a chance for them. And we can say, that's a great concern. We're going to, in essence, we put it in a parking lot type of situation, and we'll capture that and we'll share that back with whoever our sponsor was to say, here's what the team said were issues that are beyond the scope of what the problem really was that you need to be aware of. So
sure.
We'll try and give some added value there. And then we'll start walking through the rest of the problem-solving process. But that's how we get that kind of that initial phase of resistance dealt with up front. It's not to say that we always get it all out of the way, but it makes a tremendous difference. And I've done this in salt mines in Canada, in chemical plants in the UK, chemical facilities in Brazil, fiberglass manufacturing in Germany and Slovakia. And if you do that up front, it really, now you're focused on what the problem is, and you're working as a team to solve it, because
Sure.
people want to fix things.
Sure.
Great.
Hey, Dan, let's take a quick break. When we come back, you mentioned your 8-step problem-solving approach, which I am aware of that because I've seen you give this presentation. Can you walk us through those 8 steps when we come back?
Sure.
Yep. Okay. We'll be right back. At Harmonious Workplaces, we believe work should provide purpose, satisfaction, and growth. We empower people to thrive by fostering environments where individuals can find meaning in their work and organizations can succeed through thoughtful, well-executed strategies. We're committed to making work better for the people who do it and the leaders who guide them. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. So we've been talking to Dan about involving people, right, in this continuous improvement process. And you were just kind of talking, Dan, am I getting it right? Like it's really about having the people like get involved in co-creating and collaborating on what the problem is, identifying what the problem is, and so that they actually have some ownership in this, right?
Yes, ownership in the problem and the solution.
Right. So I know that you had mentioned in the previous segment, you mentioned your 8-step problem solving approach. Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. So this is not my original process, and I'll put it out there. So give some proper attribution. Just like any good Lean Six Sigma guy, I go out and look and borrow what seems to be the best for the situation, and we always try it, and that's why defining the problem is so important, because you want to have the right tool to solve the problem, and if you don't define it, you won't narrow in on that tool.
Makes
So
sense.
my typical process comes out of the 8D problem solving approach, which was popularized through auto manufacturing, namely Ford. But if you dig back a little bit further, it comes out of Kepner Trigo, who's a well-known problem-solving consulting outfit going back 50 plus years. So it's a method that works a lot when we're doing these mapping type of processes. Now, depending on what you need, you might do a simple Deming plan, do, check, act, very straightforward.
Sure.
Or you might do the super involved Six Sigma DMAIC process, which is design, measure, analyze, improve, control. When you look at all these,
he's throwing out all the acronyms, guys. It's none of us today.
Yeah, I've got FLAs and TLAs. You know, 3-letter acronym, 4-letter acronym. Okay.
Wait, there's 4-letter acronyms?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
5. Yeah.
The set of acronyms has expanded.
You just need to start looking, and you'll see. That's what happens, Ben.
Right on.
So back to the 8-step approach. So the first one is planning and getting a team together. So it's creating the team. So there you do have a conceptual problem statement out there, but it's making sure you have the right people engaged and in the room.
Sure.
So step 1, do you have the right folks?
Mm-hmm.
Step 2 is really defining and describing the problem. So we'll go through that process I just walked through, where we have people in the room going through their event process and come back and rework the problem statement. And so we'll do that through, as I said, a structured brainstorming process. And then usually, since I'm working in process improvement, there's some sort of sequential process we're trying to address, be that a manufacturing line, or it could be something. I've helped companies map out their hiring process in HR. So it can be any
Sure.
sort of back office thing. But we will then map out what we're working on. So and I'm usually walking them through a swim lane type of process map, and I can go on for an hour on that, and I won't this morning. But it's a way to take whatever's in people's heads as a concept of how things get done to a common visual understanding of how they get done.
And are those swim lanes typically like the functional areas or the person
Yes.
that's right.
Yeah. So usually there's 5 or 6 different horizontal swim lanes, and those are either tied to a role, or a function, or a person's name.
Sure.
And it works from top left to bottom right. Top left, you're starting that process and you're walking it through to completion. And we'll list out, we'll try and identify certain phases, because typically you have multiple kind of big chunks of activity to tie together.
Right.
And then what are all those little steps? The noun verb kind of things that make a process go, and we'll get that on a wall.
Okay.
And as how it is today, current state.
Sure.
And then we will, while we're doing this, so that's step 2. Step 3 would be, is this so bad we need to do something now to limp by and cover us? And that may be throwing extra labor or extra equipment or getting some support. And so that is, we call those temporary countermeasures, or in more common vernacular, a Band-Aid.
Sure.
And so what we want to make sure is that Band-Aid is not the panacea for getting to a true solution. And make sure we hold ourselves accountable to not falling into that trap.
Right. That's got to be tough, right? Because
Right.
then you get to the if it ain't broke, don't fix it anymore.
Right. So what that is that gives you the luxury of time to do the things the right way to resolve the issue. So that's our step 3. We will then go back to what we've come up with as a group from both our map and all that venting that happened earlier, because usually there's something tied to that step on that map. It can be, hey, I have an extra inventory built up because I'm not efficient, or I'm always making things wrong, therefore I have defects, or we get to this point and we have to wait on somebody else to make a decision, and that just eats up. So we'll start identifying those things in a traditional lean sense are wastes. So those can be transportation, inventory, movement, which is typically more people than trucks or logistics.
Sure.
Waiting. So do I have to wait for somebody to make a decision or wait for a part? Overproduction. Am I making too much stuff? Because too much is as bad as too little oftentimes, and that's kind of a lean concept that not everybody can wrap their head around. Overprocessing. Do I have to touch this thing more than I want to because I didn't make it right the first time?
Yeah.
And that's usually because of the last one of the last wastes, D for defects. The other waste that is not sometimes in the typical model is U for unused creativity, and that's getting people involved in the problem-solving process. So we will go look. We'll look at that map and we'll say, you tell me on this map where things are wrong, and we'll label them in some way we all understand. Then we will walk through what's causing that to happen.
Okay.
List all those things out.
So this is step 4, right?
Yes. So we're identifying, describing, verifying root causes for all those issues.
Right.
And then we'll say, okay, what do we need to do to fix those? What are the real, true corrective actions that will either mitigate or get rid of this cause that therefore leads to frustration or inefficiency.
That's
So that's
step 5.
step 5. So it's choosing those corrective actions.
Sure.
And through that, we're also going to do some benefit effort type of ranking, because you want to try and fix the things that are going to give you the most benefit first.
Makes sense.
And you might not be able to hit everything, so do the thing that's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck first.
So is it low hanging fruit type of thing, or is
It may not be.
may not be, right?
Oftentimes we might have a third element in that ranking, which is technical feasibility. So the easiest thing might be to fix an issue is I'm going to build a new plant. Well, that might not be technically feasible to do. So then you have to make another choice with how you're going to spend your time and your resources. So we'll go through that, figure out what we're going to do. Then step 6 is to start to implement those corrective actions, and then we will check against how we were doing before versus after we've made the improvement. So it's important to have a baseline and a standard to compare to know, did your change have an impact or not?
Sure.
And those can be quantitative, which as an engineer I prefer if I can get, or qualitative if you don't have a true means. That, it might be, did my customer satisfaction go up? Well, I can put a number to that, but it's still a little bit squishy,
that,
right?
Yeah. Okay. To an engineer, it's squishy. To a people person, it's like,
oh, I got a number. It must be real. Then step 7 is, how do I turn that change into something that is sustainable? So you institutionalizing the change. And so oftentimes it is, if I'm in manufacturing, it is, we might be changing how our automation interacts with that process, or we might be changing a procedure. And so that has all these human spin-offs that you've got to deal with training and reinforcing it by going out, making sure everybody in the organization can see, hey, here's how we're doing things now, and holding ourselves accountable to doing it the new way, because human nature is to slide back to where you were before. It's this kind of inertia thing we've got to always fight. So you've got to put the time in to make the new way the new standard and the new habit.
right.
And as with any habit, it takes some time to get there, time and reinforcement.
Yeah. In the bridges model that we've talked of change, it's moving from the neutral zone, which is that part where people are like, I want to go back, I want to slide back, to the new beginning where this is the new way of doing things.
Yeah, and in essence, by doing that, you set the new baseline. And if we're doing true Toyota production system style improvement, we would then be doing incremental tiny improvements, which once we skill up our people and empower them to do that from that new standard that we're always measuring against.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to leave out step 8, which is the most important one. And that is congratulating and acknowledging your team when you've made that change and sustained it, and you can see it in the numbers, and thank them. And that can be face-to-face thank you for the efforts. It can be all the various types of reward and recognition that you might bring to the table, depending on what the effort was.
Sure.
But you want to give that positive reinforcement for people who participated in this whole process for a couple of reasons. One, once you learn it, you should be able to apply it on your own going forward. So as a consultant, that's a little bit bad news for me. But part of what I bring to the table is walking them through this process and helping them understand, and then potentially implement similar problem-solving efforts on their own.
Sure.
So there's that. There's also positive reinforcement from the perspective of, hey, I've made a difference in this company, and I had skin in the game and put effort in to make it work, so therefore I should have some reward and recognition as part of that.
Right.
So
Right.
there's a little bit of that once in it for me from that perspective, in addition to whatever benefit they got out of the improvement itself. And depending on the size of the improvement, we'll apply some sort of change model that helps walk through some of those human side issues at a real high level. If it gets really deep, then we'll bring in outside folks who are change management experts to help walk through that.
Right on. So before we're going to take a quick break in a second, but before we do that, can I just run through those 8 steps real quick just to make sure our listeners have that?
Sure.
So do I have this right? So planning and creating the team with cross-functional subject matter experts, SMEs. Right?
Yes.
You thought I was going to get away with not putting an acronym in there.
Not another TLA.
Then number 2, defining and describing the problem through mapping. Containing the problem is number 3 with temporary measures. Don't get comfortable with those. Identifying, describing, and verifying root causes. Then choosing corrective actions. That's step 5.
Yes.
Step 6 is implementing and validating those corrective actions and comparing the results to prior results, right? So
Yes.
that's a quantitative and qualitative analysis. Number 7 is to institutionalize the changes that you've made as preventative measures for slipping back into, so basically kind of enculturating this, if that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Right? And then the last one is congratulating your team and acknowledging the improvements that they've made.
Yes, those are the 8.
Right on, man. We love a good framework.
Thanks, Rich.
Awesome. Well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Oh, you going to say something, Ben?
I was just going to set up a question for when we come back.
Please do.
I would love, Dan, if you could share a little bit about, as you're going through some of these processes to identify problems and then identify solutions and implement those solutions, if you found that looking at things and making very small, gradual changes seems to work better than trying to implement a big bang solution, and just hear your experiences with that.
Sure.
Awesome. All right. We'll be right back.
Meet Hermie the HR Hermit Crab. Laugh, learn, and lead better with Hermie. Hermie is here to tackle workplace madness with heart and humor from Harmonious Workplaces. He's perfect for HR pros, leaders, and change makers. Hermie teaches workplace lessons through cartoons and is great for team discussions and workshops. Get your copy on Amazon now. www.hermiehrhermitcrab.com. Again, that's hermiehrhermitcrab.com.
And we're back. So Dan just walked us through his 8-step problem-solving approach. And then Ben, before we went to break, you were going to pose a question to Dan.
Yeah, so I'm really curious about how you've managed to get some of those changes to be implemented and to stick, and if you found that teams respond a little bit better, either individually or as a team, to making smaller, gradual changes, or if the process seems to work better if it's just one big bang kind of a change.
So as any good consultant, my answer is it depends.
Oh, you snuck that in.
Yeah. So I'll keep going. I don't know what that was.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. So if you are looking at continuous improvement from the most pure state, then you really want to get to those tiny incremental day by day improvements, because if you stack that up over time, you're going to have usually the same sort of impact as you would with a big bang, but along the way, it's the boiling the frog analogy. You don't notice those changes as you go. To get there, you've got to have a high respect for people and a learning organization to make that happen, because you've got to have you've got to have confidence that the team has the skill to make those incremental improvements, and they're going to do it in a way that doesn't jeopardize the business in some form or fashion. And with that comes empowerment of those employees. And that's often tough for companies to get to that sort of culture.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real generative state of affairs. But from a pure learning organization continuous improvement standpoint, that's where you want to get to. And if you look at the Toyota model as a basis, that's really what they strive for, is those everyday improvements. Now, it's very important when you make those little incremental changes that the standard changes along the way. So each time you make a change, you have a new baseline that everybody is aware of and works from the next time. So you aren't going, somebody changes it one way day one, and then the guy comes in on the next shift and says, "Oh, I don't understand why this is different. I'm going to go back to how I had it." And then you're just chasing your tail back and forth. So that's part of that learning organization is getting to that point. As a consultant, I'm often brought in to help with the big bang stuff. That's just kind of how it is, and it has its own challenges with making things stick. And there has to be alignment throughout the organization if it's something really big. I've worked on plant design changes and changing physical equipment in the field. And I've also been involved in things like ERP system updates, which are a whole other animal in terms of organizational change, and good ones and bad ones. So I've got some of the battle scars to go along with it. And you've got to really make sure you are aligned on those large changes that impact the whole organization if you're going to make them stick, because those are really the tough ones to avoid the inertia and people sub-optimizing the new system to go back to the way they used to do things.
Oh, right.
You can work in both environments. You just need to be aware of what those pitfalls are in each, and then come up with a plan to address those and execute to that plan.
Sure. Well, Dan, before we're coming up to time here, before we wrap up, do you have like what would be like the one solid piece of advice that you would give to an organization who is going to be undergoing some kind of a change towards their continuous improvement?
As is probably not a surprise based on the discussion we've had today, it is really getting your employees involved as early as you can and help them be a part of defining that problem and ultimately solving the problem. That's when you have that ownership, even if we didn't talk about team dynamics and what size the team should be. Usually it's, for what I'm working on, it's got a limit. You can't have a team of 20. It's usually somewhere 8 to 12, 10 being the sweet spot. If you have that and you have that team engaged and they're cross-functional, they become the emissaries of that change to their peer group.
Sure.
And you can really leverage that. So by getting that group involved up front, understanding what the problem is, understanding what the 4 or 5 things we're working on first to address it, why are we doing it, and what's in it for the team members as well as their peers, you can help make that happen. But you can't do that unless they're involved up front and have that understanding. So getting that early involvement is key.
Awesome. All right. Well, I really like the research aligns very closely with what you just said. Like that my eyes lit up when you said a team of 8 to 12, because that's like you said, that's right in the sweet spot where the people are diverse enough to have different perspectives, and it's small and contained enough where you're actually going to get something done, and you're not in analysis paralysis or you've got too much conflict. So very good. Cool. Hey, Dan, how can people get in touch with you?
Sure. So, probably the best way is to go out to my company website, which is lakehurstconsulting.com, LAKEHURST consulting.com. And that's got all my contact information and talks a little bit about the business offerings that we typically um, interact with companies on, the problems we help companies solve. And then you can also find me out on LinkedIn if you're so inclined that way. So I love to make connections and have conversations out on that platform. And it's Daniel A. Pinkham Jr. on the LinkedIn platform.
Right on. Cool. All
Thank you, Dan.
right. Thanks, Dan. Thanks a million.
Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
you're welcome.
Really.
Great talking with you all.
If anybody has any, again, any questions for Dan, look him up on LinkedIn, go to Lakehurst Consulting. And in the meantime, if you want to get some more information, we've some of these topics, I'm so relieved that I feel validated, right? And some of the things we've been saying, like you actually put the rubber to the road on, or the rubber, on how this you can put those small changes, a learning culture. I mean, everything that you talked about very closely aligns with the research that's out there and things that we've talked about on this podcast, right?
Yeah. Getting the team aligned up front and having that learning organization where people feel safe to propose changes and own it and see it through. Love that.
And leaving room in your process, Dan, for the unused creativity. That is such a treasure trove of a subject. I will be following up with you about that.
Great.
How can you
Awesome.
even begin to define it? And it's so important. And that is the innovation that we talk about. That depends on the learning culture and the P safety. We're just gonna.
Right.
I'm gonna make that an acronym before we're done, guys. Psychological safety is down to P safety now, Dan. You heard it here.
Okay.
Right on. All right, folks. Well, thanks for tuning in. And until the next time, make change your friend. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.